Having said all that, let me share with you some of what we're learning from 8 going into 9 years in the field and 10 years in the project. And start with traditional media, the world I came out of, the one I'm most interested in until now. I used to teach mass communication. For any of you who have been in Los Angeles, I taught at UCLA. And when I used to teach, I argued that no medium ever goes away. They adapt, they change. If ever a medium were going to go away, it would have been radio after the beginning of television. When television sucked all the content out of radio, took all the stars out of radio, radio didn't roll over and die. It learned how to adapt. It formed alliances with the music industry, and today radio is a vibrant and important medium, but a smaller medium than it used to be. As we look at all of the media around us, we believe none of it will disappear, but most of it will survive as smaller businesses in a digital era. Now, we've been seeing this go on already. If you look at theatrical film, going to the movies, in the English-speaking world, in 1946, we sold 4.3 billion movie tickets. Last year, the population more than doubled. To keep pace, you would have had to sell 9 billion movie tickets. Instead, last year, we sold 1.3 billion. Put another way, 1946, 90 million people a week went to the movies. Last year, population more than doubled. 21 million people a week went to the movies. The movie business, the theatrical, going to the theater business, is a tiny business compared to what it used to be, but it's a high-profile business, a highly profitable business. It drives the home video business, and it's no coincidence that theatrical film reached its peak in 1946 on the eve of the introduction of television. If you look at the music business has a business model that is nothing short of extortion. The business model of the music industry says, you like 2 songs, you have to go out and buy an entire album, an entire CD for 18 Swiss francs. Today, interest in music has never been greater. People are listening to more music in more places than they ever have before. Love of music is higher than it's ever been before, but people aren't going to the music store and spending the 18 francs on the 2 songs. In most cities, you can't even find a music store. I spent about an hour last night and about 3 hours this morning walking around Zurich. I'm sure you have one music store left somewhere. I couldn't find it. If you go to America, the 2 most famous music stores in America, in Los Angeles, the Tower Records on Sunset Strip, gone, and the Virgin Megastore in Times Square, gone in a month. The most famous music store I knew in the UK was what was Tower, now it's ZZ, in Piccadilly Circus, gone. There's almost no music stores left. People aren't going to the music store and spending 18 francs on the 2 songs. They're either going online to the illegal sites and stealing the 2 songs, or they're going to legal downloading services like iTunes and buying them for 2 francs or 2 euros. The depressing future of the music industry, not music. Music has an extraordinary future, bigger than ever. But the depressing future of the music business is if they get it right. If they figure out how to get you to go online and to buy the music instead of steal it. And that's a big if. But if they do, what used to produce 18 francs for them will now produce 2 or 3. And that's only if they get it right. I think all music is going to be free in the next 5 years. Music companies are going to support their music in other ways. You can look at what Live Nation's doing with Madonna, where they're now getting a cut of her touring revenue. And touring is not diminished by free downloads on the internet. That actually increases interest, which is why Coldplay released their first single last year of their album for free on the web. They're getting a cut of her merchandising, her endorsements. The whole business model is changing. But if you want to see what's happened to music, you just have to look at some numbers. In the English-speaking world, to be a #1 album in the high point of music in the 80s and 90s, you had to sell 15 million copies of an album at a minimum. Occasionally, their CD would come along that would sell as many as 30 million copies. Michael Jackson's Thriller, although he still seems to have it, he sold out 50 shows last week in the UK, but I don't think that's love of music. I think that's people who want to go to the freak show. But nonetheless, he sold it. But Michael Jackson's Thriller sold 30 million, Eagles' Greatest Hits, Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, but you had to sell at least 15 million copies. 2005, the #1 selling album, Mariah Carey's The Emancipation of Mimi, 4.9 million copies. 2006, Disney's High School Musical, shows you who's buying music, 3.9 million copies. 2007, it was almost Disney's High School Musical 2, got edged out at the last moment by a guy I had never heard of. Maybe you have. Josh Groban's Christmas album at 3.7 million copies. And then in 2008, Lil Wayne, not Lil Wayne, Lil Wayne, L-I-L, Lil Wayne at 2.4 million. Just from 2005, Mariah Carey 4.9, 2008, Lil Wayne 2.4. The music business is disappearing. And the newspaper business, 30 years ago, teenagers didn't read newspapers, but started to when they got into their 20s and 30s. Today, teenagers don't read newspapers, and the evidence is clear, they never will. A lot of people look at teens and say, well, they're just not interested in news. They don't care. Nothing could be further from the truth. Teens today more interested in news than any teenage generation in the last 70 years. They've figured out that what happens halfway around the world can change their lives. They're just not going to newspapers, they're going online to get their information. In every country in the world we are in, when internet penetration gets to 30%, offline newspaper sales begin to decline. I suspect the same thing is happening here in Switzerland, but with your help, maybe we'll get a partner and be able to prove that. But every country we're in, when we get to 30, so if you look at India, where internet penetration's at 7%, offline newspaper sales skyrocketing. The sad truth for newspapers is every time a newspaper reader dies, he or she is not being replaced by a new reader. You can play that out. Everybody knows digital's the biggest threat newspapers have ever faced. Everyone's talking about that. Newspapers are also facing right now the second biggest threat they've ever faced. And I'm one of the few people talking about that. And that second biggest threat is global warming, is sustainability. There was a story in our Los Angeles Times, my hometown paper, about 6 months ago, about my governor in California. Now, normally, you'd have no idea who the governor of California is. You'd have no reason to know who the governor of California is. But in this instance, you actually do know who the governor of California is. And incidentally, my governor can beat up your governor. Or at least...